Archons like I was, you will wake up and you'll feel like, wow, I've been a zombie my whole life without realizing it. Like, but then it'll all return. Maybe I'll do a video on how to make this, but my Templar cross, I take it to bed, I shower with it, everywhere I go, I always have it, because it has a very special enchantment to make you invisible to the Archons. I already have Archons inside me. Most people do. The people watching this most certainly have Archons in them. And the Archons, what I find interesting too, is because they gain control of you mentally, the mental, the mercurial, is above the physical and the spiritual. So they know that you'll never be able to combat themselves. You'll never be able to combat Archons through spiritual methods or physical methods. So the only way to like really make it hard for them to live within you is meditation and therapy. An inner temple meditation where you, like astral travel, instead of going to the spirit world, the astral world, you travel within your psyche. And it can become just as potent, and it's very similar to lucid dreaming, where you go inside your brain and you find a big old temple and you carry a fire with you that represents the purity of whatever god you worship. As long as they're not aligned with the Archons, because also a lot of pantheons are. Yeah. Not the Aesir though. A lot, yeah. Some of the Olympians. But anyways, you carry this pure fire with you. A safe bet would be any type of primordial fire, because primordials are less like gods and more like direct manifestations of source or void, of Apsu or Tiamat, and yeah, more power. Like if there's lowercase g gods and then a capital God, they're like middle case, even though there's no such thing. But anyways, yeah, anything like Agni, right? Carry that fire with you, bring it to a brazier within the temple, and you light it. And you'll notice that the temple is covered with things that are like the Upside Down from Stranger Things. It's covered in slime and tentacles and vines and black mold. And there's usually an Archon that's in the temple that'll sit there. And they have this weird thing where they, like Pennywise, where using your fear, they will make you enslaved in your own life. They'll make you feel enslaved in your own life. When truly, if you're having a lucid dream and you want to break out of it, you're getting chased by a monster, you turn into a bigger monster and eat them, and suddenly you have more power. They will rely on essentially psyoping your mind to trick you into thinking that when you enter the temple that they have made for themselves out of your actual temple, that you have no power there. And they will manifest, and depending on which part of the brain this temple is in, they will manifest as whatever advantage they have in that section of the subconscious. And it can be terrifying, which is why you could do two things. You could fight it, in which that would be an absolutely Chad move. That would be very based. Or you could just light the fire, and suddenly it becomes weaker, and then a section of this region within your subconscious is liberated. It's purified. The slime and the mold disappears, and you just see like gold or white marble, and then this thing is in your domain, and then you could just kill it and remove it. You know, so I do these inner temple meditations, and if you have to do it every day, because if you go like a week, some of these Archons will start to go, oh, he's no longer on the offensive. Let's just snuff out these fires and like redo it all, right? So so a lot of my progress has been lost, unfortunately. But then therapy, you actually work through your trauma, find healthy coping mechanisms, do whatever you have to do, EMDR or EMDR, and whatever else you have to do. And then when you do that, when you have years of emotional maturity and emotional development, you make it harder for them to, enter. And when your mind becomes strong, they hate strong will. They only want their God to be strong of will. So, you know, and it's an interesting thing. It's a little side tangent. Within my gnosis, cows, being a very sacred animal that represents Brahman, they're a physical manifestation of the metaphor of what the preserver, creator, and destroyer is. And because the actual temple to God is in the human body, the inner temple, um, these Jewish mystics of the Talmud sacrificed the red heifer recently for the coming of the third temple. Because in Judaism, they believe that the temple to God is a physical monument and a physical location, which is an inversion of the actual temple to God. That temple that they built connects them to Yaldabaoth, and they consecrated it through sacrificing the most innocent, holy animal there is. Whereas I don't eat cows, I abstain from eating cow meat, and I believe that there is no temple you can build to God physically that is greater than the temple in the human body. So that's probably the most anti-Abrahamic thing I've ever said, or anti-Abrahamic thing I've ever said. No red heifers here. No. But anyways, so yeah, the Archons will basically, if there is a likelihood that you can get rid of them, they will create, you know, fake opposition or fake opportunities to defeat them, where it's like, oh, he's aware of us. Because the Archons do a really good job at this is why they live in the subconscious, not the conscious. They can whisper to you and make you want to do things like, you know, and I'll say it, you could say my irresponsible spending habits were why, when I was wealthy for the first time in my life, I bought a $300 pair of shoes, an $80 waistcoat, a $90 pair of pants, because I wanted to look vain. I wanted to be a little crass and look like a spiffy old-fashioned gentleman. And then I look at it and I'm like, you know how many fucking children have been, you know, don't have anything, any toys, and how many, like, you know, women have been raped, and this money could have gone towards feeding children, giving them toys, or helping human trafficking survivors. And that's where I naturally think. So the notion of me, you know, maybe I have this lesser instinct, you know, but also a part of me is like, I feel like something was deep in my subconscious that really hates humanity and just wanted me to get that, just to be like, fuck you, you know. So that's what I mean. Like, the Archons will do things where, you know, you don't realize it until you realize it in retrospect. And this could be harmless, but it can also be like, you know, a guy doing something horrific and being like, the demons told me to. Or he's just crazy. The Archons like that either way, though. If you're crazy, it's easier. So, you know, this is a chance you're not crazy, and it's literally Archons that have gained such oppression over you, or you're crazy, and you most certainly have Archons because you're crazy. You can't win. But yeah, they'll feed you little things where it's like, I want to get rid of, you know, these Archons or these negative spirits. So, you know what? Therapy, that's, you know, this is a spiritual threat. These are spiritual beings, right? I'm not going to save myself from these spiritual beings by going to therapy. That's time I'm wasting that I could spend in ritual. That's not your thought, by the way. And same thing. Well, if they feed on me and my fear, and they promote mediocrity and ego, I'm just going to hit the gym. I'm going to work on a bunch of projects. I'm going to, you know, do something meaningful that's worth having pride in. Sure. If you have pride, yes, it is harder for Archons to manipulate you. If you have humility, it is harder for Archons to manipulate you. However, people say, well, you know, mental health is so easy, but there's this advanced ritual I could perform, or, you know, I actually have to put in work to go to the gym and build muscle. The thing is, that's not true. The Archons want you to think that's true, because the truth is, addressing your own mental health is the hardest thing you can do. And, otherwise you wouldn't be so eager to jump into a super hard, elaborate ritual or a super hard, elaborate workout routine. If that were the case, you would be jumping to therapy. So yeah, and it's interesting because I met people that are lost to the Archons. Like, I could tell they were genuinely possessed by the Archons, and since if you have a predisposition to this, like, I met someone that I don't think had schizophrenia when they were first possessed by the Archons, but because of the link between schizophrenia and anxiety and stress and adrenaline, the way the Archons were torturing him made him impulsive, made him fearful, and when you're fearful of something that is inherently spiritual, you think usually it's suppressing you through spiritual means. No, it's not this time. So you're going to think, I'm going to go do these rituals. So now you're even more vulnerable, and now the Archons are like, this is perfect, and we're going to haunt this person and control their subconscious. They're never going to resolve their problems. They're not going to do an inner temple meditation. And, since they're stressed and they're going to find out that their spiritual methods don't work, they're going to start drinking to make sense of things, right? Maybe I can alter my mind through these substances. Marijuana is considered sacred. Peyote is considered sacred. These shamans have these experiences. And, they'll go into this train of thought of like, well, if these things are altering my mind, what if I take spiritual holy substances to alter my mind back to a state of healing? Marijuana's medicine. Thing is, the Archons struggle against your lucidity. The way your human brain naturally is, the way your matrix is made out of, they are unnatural. So if you're thinking naturally, if you're living naturally, living a good, healthy way of life, not doing any substances like fucking nicotine, basically, the less you're psychically inhibited. Because if you're psychically inhibited, you still have that psychic energy. If you're like me and you have psychic energy and it's inhibited by alcohol or vapes, you still have that. The Archons are feeding on it because you're not using it. Yeah, that's something to think about. But yeah, these beings thrive in the realm of psychedelics. They thrive in the realm, like, unless you have serious willpower and like what to expect, like, you can have successful. I love tripping out on mushrooms, but also I know that that's just brain rot. That's just like playing video games. Everything in moderation, I suppose. And the Archons hate moderation. They love absolutes. So when I tried to stop, like drinking alcohol, like in general, drinking alcohol helps them. But I think I stopped drinking alcohol for the wrong reasons. It was to absolutely deny myself this and cause me pain because I felt like I had no control. And now recently, I'm still an alcoholic. I still have the gene. It's still a struggle being sober. But I noticed since I started drinking again, I haven't drank as much. I've kept it in moderation. That obnoxious streak I had on YouTube, not a big thing. And the Archons hate moderation because that's a sign that you're reclaiming a sense of agency within yourself. That's a very important thing. I still would rather not want to drink, but now I know that I'm just choosing not to drink because I want to enhance my psychic abilities and not because I feel like I have no control. And I'm not going to guilt trip myself if I have a drink, but I'd rather prefer to remain sober, even though, yes, it does cause pain. It gives me the jitters. It's not pleasant, but, I have priorities and goals, So the Archons, when your mind becomes dependent on external influences on consciousness, that's what the Archons are. They are an external invasive force within your mind. So if you're altering your mind with external materials, that's more similar to what they are. So when you're in your state of drunkenness or being high or tripping, it's easier for them to actually get a deeper grip into your subconscious. So now this person, I hope they're not alive, honestly, just to be purely ethical and quite frank with you. They started doing drugs, and then they got absorbed into it, and then they got psychosis, and then they kept their psychosis. They got literal schizophrenia from Archons because they refused to go to therapy, and they tried to fight the Archons spiritually. You try, but sometimes it just doesn't get through to people. You know, and for me, as someone who's fought the Archons for so long with much more failure than success, it's easy for me to judge, but I understand how these things work. Most people don't, and if you don't, that's absolutely terrifying, which is kind of why I'm making this video. But yeah, no. So basically, I'm just ripping the fuck out of this vape because what I intend to do is, in my path, I want to be able to help people fight against Archons, but I need to be pure myself. I need to, because there is a way, there is a ritual process that I plan on undertaking that not only makes you immune to Archon influence, it makes your body so fucking like awful to them to where your very presence scares them. You know, like this might keep me safe from Archons. Like they don't see me. It's like camouflage, which was interesting because you know, in my battle with the Archons a couple of years ago, it was so bad, I thought I was on the verge of psychosis, and I had friends that were considering getting me 302'd, right? And I was like, I'm not sure if this is legitimately a spiritual experience anymore, or if I'm actually losing my mind. And then, I'm not gonna, like, this is very personal how I even got this enchanted, but I trusted someone, and they were like, put this on, it'll literally not be a problem. I put this on. Instant, like, my mental health, no stress, no attack, other than what's already in me, but not external attack from Archons in the environment. Being quite literally invisible to Archons, by the way, they can't see this video, which is crazy to me. You know, you might be able to see it, you might be possessed by an Archon, but they might be watching this through your eyes and be like, why is there just a screen? Why are you staring at a screen? Which is overpowered. It's like Odin's runestave of stealth, right? It's very similar. But yeah, no, being actually like hidden from the Archons, it's given me the advantage. It's given me time to study them, to get close to them, to watch them, learn how they work, without them being the wiser, something that most human beings cannot do. So I've gotten close to them and I'm like, just looking over their shoulder, and they're like, you know, and I'm just like, interesting, I'm writing this down. But yeah, so that helps, right? And I haven't been attacked, right? Now the battle is internal, right? And there are greater Archons and lesser Archons. I've had greater Archons inside me, and I purged them through very unpleasant inner temple meditation where I killed them the same way the new version of Pennywise was depicted as being killed by the Losers Club. That's how I killed them. A ritual of deicide, basically, where you are within your own realm. You're like, this is my realm. This is my domain. I am God here, and you are weakness. You are pathetic. And you flip the script because they are in your domain. They're in your subconscious. Your subconscious. Right? And to some extent, they're only there because you allow them to be. That gives you great leverage that they don't want you to know you have. Which is, you know, they're smart for that, but you're also better. So I killed some greater Archons within me. So there's just little skitterers just skittering around in there, right? So what do I intend on doing? All right. So this, hold on. Well, 1 hour and 22 minutes. This path I intend on pursuing will basically be me making myself immune to the two things that even initially attract them, that they really like: fear and sexuality. And Jesus Christ, I am not ready for this. Basically, you know, I'm pretty good with not watching adult content. I'm not good with not masturbating, right? So it's going to probably be a couple of years before I'm married. The goal is to basically not masturbate, to not do anything sexual, to be functionally celibate until I get married and I fuck my wife. That will drive the Archons crazy. You know, people that are celibate, the Archons don't like possessing, because they go in there and they're like, how? You know, they're like, you know, it's unbearable. They're like, how? This is like eating chicken wings without sauce. How? You're just eating white meat by itself, you know? That bothers them. And also fearlessness. If you're truly not afraid, as fear's the mind killer, then that also, they're like, how? How can you expect me to live here if you're not afraid? So yeah. Yeah, so there would be a function, like part of my Hyperborean path, part of this path is the Templar tradition, Templar way of life. My robe is a Templar robe. You know, you've seen it in my videos. So taking this kind of, it's like taking a vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience, right? I don't want to go for the poverty part, but the chastity, yes. And obedience. I'm very obedient to my principles. But yeah, so to be chaste is to become like, the Archons don't want to fuck with you. But also to be fearless. There are many things I'm afraid of. You know, and there's a difference between disgust and fear, right? So I'm afraid of house centipedes, the 12-legged little monsters that are gray with those long-ass legs that run across your ceiling and floor. Part of this is I'm going to have to learn to be okay with letting one of them crawl on me. And as someone throughout my whole life that would cry like a little girl and run away and get like a fucking a lighter and a can of hairspray that would vomit, like projectile vomit, when looking at them, that I remember seeing one and I fainted. I just fainted. I still want to faint. If it's big enough, I will faint. I'll just fall to the ground, right? Like a goat. You know, people chopping off their genitals. I'm gonna have to be watching that video of that guy really hitting it with an axe, just till I'm like, yeah, sure, you chopped off your dick. Is that all you got? Show me more. But, you know, thankfully there is a difference between disgust and fear, right? So I won't have to do a ride along with a pedophile or snuggle with a gay dude. So, you know, that's praise. So there would be that, which I'm not ready for. But also, as I mentioned, with lucidity. When I go on this path, no nicotine. When I go on this path, no alcohol. Completely straight edge. And part of this will be going on the primal diet. You know, clearing my body of its fat reserves and filtering toxins out of my body and actually eating healthy. And basically eating mainly raw animal fat, raw animal meat, blood, raw milk, honey, things like that, which, oh, I miss that. It really helps with the arthritis and the carpal tunnel. But anyways, which is such a, it's, oh man, I miss that diet so much. The meat is psychoactive, and here's the thing. The Archons like inverting the 3 points of human existence. There are 3 points of human existence. 1, eating good food. 2, having kids. 3, community. Right? And you can have technically a satisfying life if you're only doing one. But the thing is, the way in which your value as an individual human being is defined ultimately by nature is those three. If you don't fit those three, you're worthless and your life has no meaning, and you're quite frankly not worth anyone's time. So the embodiment of all three would be someone that does the primal diet, lives locally, farm to table, literally eats raw animal flesh, has a lot of kids, has an upstanding community. The opposite would probably be a vegan who is an anti-natalist who is antisocial. The Archons love the latter. They hate the former, right? If you're eating what humans naturally eat in nature and you're satiated, you know, I talked about the effects of drinking blood and what it does for anxiety and depression. Yeah, if you're doing the primal diet, you are satiated. You don't need to eat much because you're eating small amounts of high concentrated nutrients. You know, if you're satiated, you're not partaking in two behaviors the Archons thrive on. The Archons love when you're starving, and they love when you're engaging in gluttony, right? So, you know, if you're fasting and starving yourself for spiritual reasons, that's not enlightenment. You're killing yourself, and the Archons are thriving off of it. Another reason I don't trust Buddhism, you know, the faster's high, where you're doing water fasting, you get these spikes of hunger that are unbearable, and then you get this enlightenment, this euphoria, like you're being punished for trying to experience God. No. Isn't the whole point to run away from suffering? Why are you fasting? Why are you punishing yourself for trying to do the right thing? Whereas if you eat raw meat, you know, like your body's doing the same thing. When you're fasting, your body is eating raw flesh, and you get the benefit of raw flesh when you have this holy experience. If you're eating another animal's raw flesh, you literally consistently, without hunger spikes, complete satiation, get the same exact spiritual experience as fasting and meditation. And it does wonders for your mental health. And then another thing, kids, we'll get there. But community. I'm already very active in my community, so it really just comes down to eating the primal diet. So no carbs, so there will be organic fruits and honey, but in general, no carbs, no sugar, just mainly fat and protein. You know, living like a literal raw carnivore, you know. Well, what about parasites? I like them. They're good. Love parasites. I don't care how you take that. Yeah, I'm just really enjoying it before it goes, right? Before it goes. So, another aspect, right? Again, as I said earlier in this video, this is all channeled, all made up. But there is this Norse dynamic between Cedar and Galder. I'm not going to edit that in. But Galder, I'm not referring to the Norse Galder. I am referring to the Hyperborean Galder within my Hyperborean tradition, and a couple other people I know's Hyperborean tradition. You know, the Galder and the Vril in place of Cedar, right? So my own made-up magic system that uses the title Galder because I channeled it, and it makes sense to me. Basically, you know, and I plan on posting a video on wedlock magic, but Galder is a patrilineal form of psychic manifestation through the lens of spiritual masculinity that applies more so to the physical world. So if you're born within wedlock, I wasn't, so you don't, like, that's the bastard's curse. The bastard's curse is if you're born out of wedlock and you don't have a patrilineal name that has a succession of 9 generations, you basically don't have 9 generations worth of luck. And that, for some reason, 9 generations worth of luck is what you need to have a decently lucky life. And if you have more than that, you have a really lucky life. You know, so like the difference, like if you have a lot of Galder, you're more likely to not slip and fall. You're more likely to be prone to fortune. You're more likely to win the slot machines. You live as a living rabbit's foot. And people will say that Galder and Vril, that people that acknowledge the same aspect of my tradition as I do, they will say that Galder and Vril are just life force in masculine and feminine form. It's not life force, it's strength. Now, the strength I think can come through life force, but it's almost elemental in a weird way. Um, how do I put this? Um, it's like, you know, saying that Galder is like life force is like saying that my ability to lift heavy weights in the gym is the same as having blood in my veins, right? Because sure, in order to have strength, ideally you would have blood in your veins, but strength is its own thing, right? So Galder is your masculine psychic strength over the material world, and to my knowledge, it can be stored and developed in bones, which is why if you're a man, it's probably best not to be cremated. I think a certain insane witch king might have had similar gnosis, but we don't talk about him. We don't talk about him. Uh, but within my gnosis, uh, within your ancestors' bones, Galder can build up after death. Like you can, Galder is in bones, and you can steal Galder from bones of animals and put it in your bones. And it's not something I feed off of. You know, so there's probably, and I think that might have something to do with the rabbit's foot because of the Galder in the rabbit's foot. Maybe because it was a black rabbit killed in a graveyard under a full moon, under a Friday the 13th. Maybe it just has a really concentrated form of Galder. And since everyone are bastards, it would seem especially lucky to have such a thing. But it might also actually be cursed, so who knows. But yeah, no, I mean, to have Galder is to be materially lucky, basically. To be more likely to be successful, to have things go in your favor, less obstacles, more victories. Yeah, and there's a very controversial video I'll be posting on how you can reclaim ancestral Galder, and it is extremely fucking edgy. It is a blood alchemy ritual. I'll not get into it. That's its own video. And then spiritually, Vril is a woman's psychic strength over the astral. You know, her ability to do divination, to talk to the dead, to do fertility magic or baneful magic or whatever it is, right? Kitty cat. So, yeah. The way I channel it, and to say that, how do I put it? Your Galder, to say that it's linked, that this form of masculine psychic will over the material world, over manifestation of wealth and things like that, to say that it's linked to beards, doesn't mean that if you can't grow a beard, you don't have masculinity or a Galder or psychic might. But it's to say that if you can grow a beard, you're allowed an insight into a masculine mystery that, yeah. And how do I put this? When you grow your beard, right, it can store Galder. It can store, next to that, just masculinity. But then we have to go into what is masculinity by my definition. So, I mean, so Galder is a masculine thing. Masculinity isn't necessarily Galder. So Galder is definitely masculinity. Masculinity isn't Galder. But basically, the more masculine you are and the longer you grow your beard, the more easier it is to say that maybe not Galder is trapped in it, but more so to say that you can use your beard as an antenna to gain access to whatever Galder you actually have, if that makes sense. And having such an advantage over the material world is useful when fighting Archons. But so the thing is, within my channeling, in order to be masculine enough to grow a long beard, within this tradition I'm talking about that I channeled, you need to basically do two things, right? You need to become the cultured thug, not the mindless brute that beats his wife, or the cultured pacifist that goes, "Oh, that's terrible. He's beating his wife. Oh, well, if we are violent, then we're just like the wife beater." Instead, to be the cultured thug is to be strong and violent, righteously violent, and to kill the wife beater, and then also have a philosophical conversation. So that's to say that you have to train like a warrior. You have to basically train to fight, not just to get strong and look big and muscular, but you have to be in fighting condition, and you have to basically keep doing that. And it's much like how with tarot in general, when you do tarot every day or a small ritual every day, it increases your psychic abilities. You know, Galder and Vril, the middle of that, just psychic strength, psychic energy, things like that, is kind of a gray, right? You know, if you know Galder is black and Vril is white, or vice versa, just generic psychic energy. In order to increase your ESP, yes, being free from foreign substances like nicotine is will help, but also like it's like going to the gym. When you first do tarot, you're not good at it, but it works your spiritual muscles, the muscles of your subtle body. It actually like rips your psychic energy, and then like muscle fibers, scarifies, strengthens, grows bigger, right? And it you could be doing tarot for so long to where you're able to do super advanced elaborate rituals that no one at the beginning of their practice is capable of. And then you stop for a few months, your spiritual body atrophies, and then you can barely do tarot again. So it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have, if you're not actively having an active spiritual life like that, then you will suffer from basically spiritual atrophy and have to start all over again. And so there's a similar thing in the specific direction of Galder, where you have to, in order to be the cultured thug, you have to read every day, and you have to train to fight. So that'll be a part of what I intend on doing, right? So in order to have utilize the Galder I have, which I am a bastard, I have the bastard's curse, and for the while I'm a bastard, I can't inherit ancestral Galder because I don't have the symbolic connection to my ancestors through a legitimate patrilineal line. However, I can just steal Galder from Bones. It's whatever. You know, for now. That'll work for now until I post my video on wedlock magic. But, and all of that. But, yeah. So, basically, if I read every day, so I'm reading Essays and Aphorisms by Arthur Schopenhauer. Next book I'm going to read is probably, you know, Marcus Aurelius, you know, letters or letters from a Stoic, whatever, or his diary, his journal, right? And then there's I want to read like Metro, like the video game series. I want to read like the first Metro book. But anyways, so as long as you're just reading a couple of chapters a day and you're sharpening your mind like that as a man, and you're training to fight, like you're actively channeling violence through a physical activity, your masculinity spiritually grows, right? And when you grow a full beard while doing this, right? When you grow a full beard while doing this, it stores that masculinity, which strengthens your ability to utilize your Galder. However, if you're very lazy, very feminine, very pacifistic, and illiterate, if you grow a long beard, you store that degeneracy in it, and it actually becomes an extra amount of an inhibitor that'll cut you off from your Galder, ancestral or synthetic. which is an interesting thing to me. Yeah. So I've tried this challenge many times, and I always shave my beard, right? So it'll be a big undertaking, but I'm going to shave my beard and mustache, and then get to reading and fighting, you know, and meditating. That's useful, and also, yeah. So I'll be shaving my beard, um, but also the other aspect, um, the vril. A lot of what I just said could be applied. It's a woman's ability to spiritually protect her family. If Galder helps the man provide for his family in terms of material circumstance and wealth and just general luck and prosperity, all that, then you could say the same thing applies to the vril. This ability to talk to the dead, see spiritual threats, give blessings, cast curses, set up defenses, banish and exorcise evil. You know, that is what it is, right? And I don't know if it's stored in the bones of women or it has an alternate means, but within my gnosis, it's okay to cremate women or whatever, because however they ancestrally like store their vril isn't dependent on bones the same way Galder is. It's almost because Galder is this psychic magical material thing that it's almost like it needs bones, like a physical structure tying itself to the dead in order to have that. Whereas it might be that vril is just stored within the spirit, which is an interesting thing to me, which is why I won't be cremated. I plan on being buried in a cairn, having rocks stacked over me, and a sword as a gravestone, which is interesting. I think that's kind of cool. It'll be on top of a cold, snowy mountain, right? But yeah, that's my take. But yeah, so Vril, very interesting subject, and I plan on posting videos on the Vril. Basically, people say to me, Alex, you seem very in touch with your emotions, very self-aware, unlike a lot of men, and have a reasonable side. Well, here's the thing: reason is driven by empathy. You have to have a high level of empathy to be reasonable, right? This is why most men are not reasonable. And in order to be logical, you have to have low empathy, which is why most women are irrational. Is to be rational, logical, cold, be an analytical asshole, requires you to have enough of a low amount of empathy to be an asshole, right? And when it comes to material things like ruling governments, ruling societies, going to war, things like that, women cannot be relied on. Only men can, because it takes a substantial lack of empathy to do the fucked up decisions that need to be done. However, when it comes to things like baneful magic, spiritually killing people, right? If it requires cold logic and reason for a man to physically bludgeon someone to death, wouldn't that apply spiritually? A lot of people get into baneful magic and apply cold masculine logic. Doesn't work. The realm of the conceptual, it needs empathy. It needs reason, right? It needs femininity. And it's because spirituality, magic, witchcraft is inherently feminine. And Odin, the great sorcerer, wanted to learn nonetheless. That's why he dressed up like a woman. So when people are like, you seem really in touch with your emotions and all of that, and you seem very vulnerable and expressive, I'm like, yes, because I've intentionally feminized myself and have trained myself to spiritually act like a woman, so I'm just barely okay with my occult practice. That's pretty much it. When doing baneful magic, you have to be reasonable about it. Logic cannot apply, otherwise it won't work. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, and it just seems easy for me to understand, but for some reason just goes over most people's heads. But funnily enough, it reminds me, two sides of the same coin. What can you do to increase your vril? So the same thing as the Galder, read a book every day, or paint, you know, do something mentally engaging, because women are intellectuals too. Different types though. Uh, you know, like men want to go to war and we want to sing battle cries, and women just sing the most beautiful things. Like when I'm trying to relax and I'm like want to drift off into fucking Avalon and to Camelot, I'm listening to beautiful Irish woman sing. But then if I'm gonna beat the fuck out of someone, I just want someone to be playing Rammstein, you know. But yeah, so it's I'm not even saying as a masculine activity you have to read masculine literature per se. It doesn't matter. Just start fucking reading. If you're a woman, start fucking reading. But then also, what? Okay, so you're required to fight to build up your masculinity in your beard. What about the women? What's their thing? I can't say for the women, but I can say as a man that is not supposed to have access to vril to the same extent, or to the extent that I do, or whatever, which is nowhere near the extent that women naturally have, even without being trained. I can say that for me, it's reading books, but also um, when you take a step back from the material world, where you look at things through a feeling, right? I think a lot of us men, and this benefits our Galder very much, a lot of us look at things like it's checks and balances, very rigid and compartmentalized, or whatever. And, you know, I think to build Galder through fighting and reading, you're fighting war. It's a type of warlike energy, right? Men are for the killing, women are for the living, and women live longer than men. So that's another synchronicity right there. But women exist for the peacetime, for the beauty of what we have achieved. We kill the enemy. That's what we do. You know, we make sure the enemy doesn't burn down our house. We even steal the enemy's house. Well, no, the house needs the touch of a woman. So it's to say that in order to gain a lot of vril, you can read books and leave yourself to sit back and just feel the irrational, right? To not compartmentalize and to just go with the flow, which is super fucking frustrating and infuriating. I hate it, you know. But you know, if the men are the checkerboards, the women are the swirly lines, you know. So that's yeah. So to, I guess, reflect on the nature of peace, right? Holy peace. If Galder, if part of attaining like the or masculinity, right, spiritual masculinity, is through sacred violence, away, you know, and reading books, then to attain vril would be to focus on books and sacred peace, right? If that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know any other way to put it, but it helps. But the thing is, if you're illiterate and you don't have that sacred sense of peace, if you're not training yourself for what comes after the fight, that type of mediocrity gets stored in your hair and will basically cut a woman or a man off from their access to whatever vril they have. However, you do the opposite. The longer you grow your hair, it's like an antenna, and if it's filled with the right substance, it helps you with channeling, just as how a long masculine beard helps you with winning. You know, and it's interesting because you can tell, like, you could get two same exact looking dudes, and if a guy is reading and fighting every day or training to fight, and he has a long neck beard that's gross and greasy, people look at it and they just are like, wow, whoa. And then if it's like Azamon Gold, they're like, oh, you know, like they can just tell, you know. And it's the same kind of thing when you see like some illiterate, you know, woman that is super toxic, not inspiring, not creative, not cultivating, not soothing, not you know, like more like us. You know, if she's more like us in all the wrong ways, then it's, you could just tell there's no spiritual insight, right? But a beautiful, very feminine, very uh, creatively inclined, peaceful woman with that's around life and creation and reading and keeping herself literate. The spiritual insights, yeah, and I suppose me growing my hair like this is an attempt at like Odin wearing a dress. you know, and it's troubling that this is longer than this. It should be the other way around. But yeah, I will say, regardless of what you do, if you consume marijuana, alcohol, or tobacco, some of those can get caught in your hair, like marijuana and nicotine. I don't know about alcohol, but even then, spiritually, all three gets trapped in your hair, everywhere, your arms, everywhere. But yeah, and even if you quit nicotine, still having nicotine in your beard or your hair inhibits your ability to connect with Galder and Vril. Yeah. So yeah, basically the entire reason I made this video was I'm gonna shave my head, shave my beard, and look like a really ugly monk, and dedicate myself to this path moving forward, so I can get a substantial amount of Vril and Galder, and just work on being my best self, not because I care about myself, but because I really just would like to purge Archons from Midgard. That's essentially the gist of this entire video.